It's been in my family for many years. It was my great-great-uncle's, and he lived in Newport, Rhode Island, so I assume he got it there. And I inherited it from my grandmother.
And so how long have you had it?
I've had it for 40 years.
Wow.
I know that my great-great-aunt had it in a room where my grandmother told me this, that was all white and gold, and this was on the mantelpiece.
I can see that.
And it was the central focus of that room.
At first glance, this elaborate mantel clock feels almost theatrical, overflowing with sculptural drama and decorative richness. Towering porcelain figures, mythological symbols, and finely painted surfaces immediately suggest a masterpiece created for display rather than ordinary use. The porcelain elements bear the mark of Königliche Porzellanmanufaktur Berlin, often known as KPM, one of the most prestigious porcelain factories in Europe. Founded in the 18th century and supported by the Prussian royal court, KPM was renowned for producing porcelain of exceptional refinement and artistic ambition. The sculptural decoration here reflects that high standard, with the central figure representing Cronus, an especially fitting symbol for a clock. Surrounding him are elaborate elements such as female sphinxes, cherubs, and richly modeled ornamental details. The clock mechanism itself was produced by the German firm Lenzkirch Clock Factory, a respected maker known for high-quality movements in the late 19th century. Both the porcelain and the movement date to roughly the late 1880s or 1890s, suggesting the clock was assembled during that period, possibly even as an exhibition piece intended to showcase craftsmanship.
I think that might be money well invested. Or you say, we like it the way it is, we're not going to do anything. Not doing anything is not a bad thing. You just don't want to do the wrong thing. So taking into consideration the quality, the condition problems, I believe that this clock at auction would sell for between $25,000 and $35,000.
Oh, wow. Well, then it's worth getting restored.
I think you should get it restored.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Well, that's amazing. Thank you.
It was my grandmother's, and about 10 years ago, my mother gave it to me. My grandmother came from Italy on the boat and landed in the United States sometime in the 1800s, and my mother was born in 1917, so I don't know whether it came from Italy or if she purchased it after she was in New Orleans and got married.
This vessel appears to be an extremely rare example of pottery associated with the short-lived workshop known as New Orleans art pottery. The pottery was founded in the mid-1880s in New Orleans through the influence of artist and educator Ellsworth Woodward, who helped establish the Ladies' Decorative Art League to promote artistic training and craftsmanship. Around 1885 to 1886, a small pottery studio opened on Baronne Street, where potters such as Joseph Meyer and George Orr produced hand-thrown ceramic vessels. The enterprise was brief, and by the late 1880s it had largely disappeared, leaving very few surviving examples. The jar here reflects many characteristics attributed to that workshop. The cross-hatched surface decoration on both sides is considered a typical visual fingerprint found on known examples. At the same time, the piece displays what might be described as a sophisticated crudeness. The handles and applied decoration appear somewhat rough and spontaneous, yet the overall composition shows clear artistic intention. Inside the vessel, the clay body and the faint concentric finishing lines created while the pot was still on the wheel are consistent with other documented pieces. The glaze resembles Victorian majolica in tone and texture, adding to its decorative appeal. Given its utilitarian form, likely a jardiniere used for displaying plants or flowers, it would have been an everyday object that rarely survived intact. The remarkable preservation of this example, therefore, makes it especially noteworthy.
It's going to be worth, estimated at auction, somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000, but we're going to get back to you on that one, okay?
Okay. All right, wow. Where should I keep it?
Not on the floor where you had it sitting a little earlier. Even though it's meant to have flowers put in it, I definitely keep it protected.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
This came down from my grandmother's side of the family. My parents had it appraised in the 70s, and they appraised it as Royal Worcester, and for like, I think either 700 or 1,000, I can't really remember. But recently I had a couple pieces restored by a professional restorer, and they told me it wasn't English because it's not marked, that more likely it was early French before the French started marking their porcelain.
Examining this porcelain service, the style at first glance recalls 18th century Chinese export wares, particularly the colorful patterns often known as tobacco leaf. However, a closer study of the body and construction shows that this is actually an English interpretation of those Asian designs. The porcelain is soft paste, a material widely used in early English factories, which immediately distinguishes it from French hard paste porcelain. Based on the shapes, modeling, and the slight notches along the rims of the plates, the set can most convincingly be attributed to Coalport porcelain and likely dates between about 1800 and 1825. The service is not a dinner set, but a dessert service, designed for presenting sweets and fresh fruit at the end of a formal meal. It includes several specialized forms typical of early 19th century English tableware. One of the most interesting pieces is a fruit cooler, a vessel designed with an inner liner so that ice could be placed underneath the fruit to keep it chilled. The deep lid also allowed ice to be placed above, maintaining the cool temperature. The service further includes a sauce tureen, probably intended for sweet sauces, along with several dessert dishes in different shapes, such as oval dishes, shell-shaped dishes, square dishes, and a central serving plate.
And therefore is quite valuable. If we add together this set, a retail value or an insurance value would be between $20,000 and $30,000.
Oh, my mom's gonna see this and she's gonna ask for it back probably.
It's from my grandparents' house. It's something that I've always admired. And when my grandmother died in 2008, my mother sort of had to fight my aunts for me to get this. I know it's a Picasso. They got it in 1965, I believe, and paid $650 for it. They had it appraised in 1983 for $5,000. I believe that the title is Jacqueline.
A ceramic plaque, preserved in a family collection for decades, reveals a direct connection to the late artistic period of Pablo Picasso. The piece portrays a stylized female bust, widely recognized as a portrait of Jacqueline Roque, the artist's second wife and one of the most influential muses of his later years. Picasso married Jacqueline in 1961, and she remained a central figure in his life and work until his death in 1973. The official title of the design is Petit Buste de Femme, or Small Bust of a Woman, a subject Picasso explored repeatedly during the 1960s. The plaque dates from a design created in 1964, during the period when Picasso was deeply involved with ceramic production in the south of France. These works were produced at the renowned Madura pottery studio in Vallauris, where Picasso began experimenting with ceramics in 1947. The technique involved pressing terracotta or earthenware clay into plaster molds derived from linoleum carvings made from Picasso's original designs. While Picasso created the prototype and design, the additions were produced in limited numbers by the studio artisans. What makes this example particularly notable is the rarity of its addition. Many ceramic editions from the Madura studio were produced in runs of 250 or even 500 pieces, but this plaque belongs to a much smaller edition of only 100. The number stamped on the reverse identifies it as example number 16 in that series.
It would have been a couple of $1,000s when they started coming out on the secondary market. These, for the last 10 years or so, have been bringing at least hammer price at auction $20,000.
Nice. Great.
So with the buyer's premium, That is often $25,000. That is what someone would have to pay. Should you wish to do a replacement value, you can certainly do $30,000 or $35,000.
So tell me about this great little bottle that you brought in.
Well, it was my grandmother's, and they called it a doll. She said that it was her great-grandmother's doll. My great-great-great-grandmother lived in North Carolina, but at some point they traveled out to Missouri and then came back to North Carolina, and that's really all the history I have on the doll.
And where in North Carolina were they from?
Winston-Salem.
This object is a figural pottery flask produced by Moravian potters in Salem, North Carolina, an important center of ceramic production in the American South during the 18th and early 19th centuries. The Moravian community established a strong pottery tradition in Salem in the mid-1700s, supplying both utilitarian and decorative wares for the region. The piece is molded in the form of a small doll-like figure, which explains why it was long mistaken as a child's toy. In reality, it is a ceramic flask, originally used to hold liquids such as spirits. The small opening at the top of the head once held a cork stopper, sealing the contents inside. Construction details reveal its production method. The visible seam along the side indicates that the vessel was formed in a press mold, where clay was placed inside a mold and pressed together to create the figure. This technique allowed Moravian potters to produce distinctive sculptural bottles with consistent shapes. Flasks of this type were made roughly between 1810 and 1830. Moravian workshops created a variety of figural forms, including animals such as squirrels, fish, and turtles, but the doll figure became one of the most recognizable designs. The crossed hands on the front even hold a small bouquet of flowers, a decorative detail typical of these charming yet functional vessels.
These are very collectible and very desirable. Have you ever had anybody look at it and say, hey, I'd like to buy that from you or anything? This flask would sell at auction for between $15,000 and $25,000.
That's amazing. God. So I'll keep on dusting it. Maybe I'll put it away so it doesn't get dusted. That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
You got these from your father? Tell us about how that happened.
Well, he and my mother had been dabbling, collecting antiques, and when they died, some of the inheritance came down to me, and part of it was this Martin Brothers grotesque that was my dad's favorite piece of pottery that they had.
The brothers Martin ushered in the modern era of decorative ceramics in England.
Few objects capture the strange charm of Victorian ceramics, quite like a Martin Brothers grotesque bird. This striking double figure is a creation of the renowned English pottery studio, Martin Brothers, which operated around London from the 1870s until about 1915. The principal designer behind these imaginative sculptures was Robert Wallace Martin, a trained sculptor who transformed traditional stoneware into highly expressive and modern decorative forms. Modeled in soft clay stoneware, the piece demonstrates the fluid, sculptural technique that made Martin Brothers famous. These birds were not merely decorative figures, but functional tobacco jars, sometimes called humidors. A small damp sponge would be placed inside the removable head to keep the tobacco stored within the body moist. Collectors often refer to them as Wally birds, a nickname derived from Wallace Martin's name. This example is especially notable because it features two birds rather than a single figure. Most Martin Brothers examples depict one character, while this pair seems almost engaged in a private conversation, giving the sculpture a lively and theatrical personality. The coloration is also distinctive. Many Martin Brothers works display subdued tones of brown and cream, but this example includes touches of blue and pink glaze, suggesting a slightly later production date, likely between 1900 and 1910.
condition of this piece is excellent. I saw that it's flawless. The one strike against it, you see these holes over
I saw
here?
those, yeah.
Okay, this was meant to be screwed to a wooden base.
Oh, okay.
Have you had this appraised before?
Yeah, about 15 years ago, and they said $7,000.
Not an unfair price 15 years ago. I think today at auction, a bird like this would sell for somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000.
Wow, you're kidding.
With the wooden base, I would probably add another $2,500 to the price.
We call it the ugly thing or the ugly vase. I bought it about 15 years ago. I'm never sure if it's a pregnant woman, if she's getting to topple over. It's a weird little piece. I liked it when I saw it. It comes from a Dutch dealer.
At first glance, the oddly shaped ceramic, often nicknamed the ugly vase, appears almost whimsical, yet it reveals the unmistakable spirit of mid-20th century modernist art. The piece blends several imaginative elements into one sculptural composition: a stylized female figure, bird and animal imagery, and an unusual pair of removable horns. Rather than a functional vessel, the work reads more like a playful ceramic sculpture where surreal imagery and experimentation dominate the design. The object is associated with the celebrated French artist Jean Cocteau, a poet, painter, and filmmaker who turned to ceramics later in his career. Inspired by his friend Pablo Picasso, who began experimenting with pottery in Valoris in 1947, Cocteau started creating ceramic designs around 1957. While Picasso produced hundreds of ceramic forms, Cocteau created a smaller body of work, exploring imaginative shapes and symbolic imagery. This vase likely dates to around the early 1960s. The base inscription identifies it as an original edition produced by the studio of Marie-Madeleine Joly and Philippe Joly in Villefranche, France. Numbered 6 of 10, the piece belongs to a very limited edition derived from Cocteau's original prototype. The rarity of the edition, combined with the connection to one of France's most influential avant-garde artists, gives the object considerable appeal among collectors.
Okay.
So I would think that he made the prototypes and then somebody was doing them after. Prints and editions are very frothy right now.
Okay.
If we were to put this at auction, though it is an edition, easily we would put this in at $10,000 to $15,000.
Sorry. That's fun for an ugly vase. Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. Very good.
These are some ceramic pieces that are by a couple named the Natzlers, and one of them did the bodies and one of them did the glazes. I inherited them from my uncle, who was a designer in San Francisco.
There are such beautiful examples, and I saw them and I just popped. Otto and Gertrude Natzler came from Austria, and they had their first studio there in 1935. And before getting married and moving here in 1938, they exhibited in Paris at the Universal Exhibition and won a silver medal.
These ceramic vessels are works by the renowned husband and wife team Otto and Gertrude Natzler, important figures in 20th century studio pottery. Originally from Vienna, Austria, the couple opened their first studio in 1935 and soon gained recognition, even winning a silver medal at the Paris Universal Exposition before emigrating to the United States in 1938. After settling in Los Angeles, they developed a collaborative method that became central to their artistic identity. Their partnership was clearly divided. Gertrude Natzler created the vessel forms on the wheel, producing exceptionally thin, elegant, and precisely balanced shapes. Subtle throwing lines remain visible on the surface, intentionally preserved as evidence of the handmade process. Otto Natzler specialized in glaze research and surface effects. Throughout their career, the couple developed over 2,000 glaze formulas. One vessel features a deep oxblood glaze, valued for its rich red tone. The other displays a rare crystalline glaze, where large crystal formations spread across the surface, creating patterns reminiscent of mineral structures or celestial forms. Numbers inscribed beneath the pieces belong to the Natzler's studio cataloging system, used to record glaze formulas and production details. These markings help confirm authenticity and document the history of each object.
The bowl, $3,000 to $4,000. The bottle-shaped vase, $7,000 to $10,000.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Really?
So the two of them together,
Oh
about,
my goodness.
yes, 10,000 to 13 or so.
Oh, that's incredible. I'm stunned. I mean, that's amazing. I had no idea. Wow.
I brought in ceramic candlesticks that I inherited from my husband's great aunt.
Okay, and what do you know about the pieces?
Well, looking at the mark on the bottom, it says Austria, and there were some maker's marks, so I went online, and it looked like it came from a studio workshop in Vienna. I thought maybe Wiener Werkstatt, but it didn't appear like that.
At first glance, these elegant ceramic candlesticks appear decorative, but their refined figures and distinctive colors reveal an important connection to early 20th century Viennese design. The marks on the base identify them as works from Wiener Keramik, a studio founded in 1906 by artists Michael Powolny and Berthold Loeffler. The workshop was closely associated with the artistic movement known as the Vienna Secession, which sought to bring modern artistic expression into everyday objects. These sculptural candlesticks feature graceful figurative forms combined with bold decorative color, characteristics often seen in Central European decorative arts of the early 1900s. The warm orange tones and stylized surfaces reflect the aesthetic experimentation of the period. Interestingly, the hole in the base shows that the pieces were designed with versatility in mind. They could function as traditional candlesticks or be electrified and used as lamps, a practical adaptation as electric lighting became more common. Based on the mark reading Austria and the founding date of the workshop, these pieces were likely produced between 1906 and about 1915. Despite a small condition issue near the top, they remain striking examples of Viennese decorative ceramics.
I don't know if European ceramics are something that are desirable here in America. I know I love them. I would guess they're probably in about the same value range.
Okay, I would say that a fair or a reasonable replacement value for this, even with the damage, would be $8,000 to $10,000.
You're kidding me!
No, these are
Wow.
these are wonderful.
Wow, that's amazing. Takes my breath away.
This came down through my father's side of the family. My great-great-grandfather was one of the original Muller Quartet members, and they played for the Duke of Brunswick, played all over Germany, and then in the 1840s, they started expanding their repertoire a bit and going throughout Europe. They were invited to play for the Tsar of Russia in 1845. They played for Tsar Nicholas I, and this was a gift that they received from Tsar Nicholas I in 1845.
So that's the family history.
That is the family
history.
history.
That's the provenance.
That
it's
is
a
the
gift
provenance.
from Tsar
Yes.
Nicholas I.
Yes.
Okay.
The egg is a finely painted and gilded porcelain example believed to have been produced by the Imperial Porcelain Factory in St. Petersburg. During the 19th century, this prestigious factory supplied luxury porcelain to the Russian court and often produced decorative eggs intended as elegant presentation gifts. Although the piece is unmarked, its materials, painting style, and gilded ornament strongly correspond with porcelain created by the imperial manufactory during the mid-19th century. At the center of the egg appears a devotional image likely representing Saint Alexandra in prayer, recognizable through the crown and ermine cloak traditionally associated with imperial saints. The painting is framed by an elaborate gilded cartouche bordered by a fine white line, a decorative device that enhances the contrast and draws attention to the miniature scene. The reverse features a burnished sunburst motif and a triangular cipher in Cyrillic characters, suggesting an imperial or noble association that would merit further research. Equally typical of presentation, eggs from this period is the silk ribbon threaded through the top, allowing the object to be suspended as a decorative keepsake.
Never really left the house.
Okay. Never allowed to leave the house.
Never allowed to leave the house.
Well, at auction today, I would expect that this would bring around $8,000.
It's amazing. That is amazing. It's been in my family since the late 1800s. It originated with our grandmother, Florence, who lived in Germany when she was quite young, from the age of maybe 8 to 13. And it has been in her home for all of the years until her passing in 1963, I believe. And my partner, when he was 10, saw it in his grandmother's apartment and begged, saying, "Please, I want to take this." And so they allowed him to take that.
Few decorative objects carry such a vivid link between family memory and late 19th century European craftsmanship as this large porcelain plaque. Carefully preserved through several generations, the piece was already displayed in the family home in the early 1900s, as confirmed by a photograph taken around 1913. Its impressive size and richly painted imagery immediately place it within the decorative tradition commonly known as Royal Vienna-style porcelain. Although often associated with the historic Royal Vienna porcelain factory, many plaques of this type were produced after the original factory closed in the late 19th century. Numerous decorating studios in Austria and Germany continued to create similar works and frequently used marks resembling the well-known underglaze blue shield, sometimes called the beehive mark. Because of this practice, identifying the exact manufacturer is often difficult. The plaque itself is entirely hand-painted, depicting a lively European hunting scene with mounted riders, dogs, and figures moving through an elegant countryside landscape. Such romantic sporting scenes were highly fashionable in decorative porcelain during the late 1800s. The painting quality is strong and likely executed by a trained studio artist who specialized in porcelain decoration. Equally striking is the elaborate American frame that surrounds the plaque. The carved sprays of pears in the corners suggest a date around the 1890s and enhance the overall visual impact.
And the frame definitely adds value to it. But the combined package, I guess at auction would sell for between $6,000 and $8,000.
Nice.
Because it is so decorative. Now the frame by itself might sell in the $1,000 to $1,500 range.
These were found in the garage of my mother's home after she died, and it was my choice, one of the things I picked out. But the reason I chose it, because there was a sticker on the bottom that told me that it was a wedding gift. And we had a list of her wedding gifts, and she married in '34.
Sometimes the most fascinating discoveries begin in the quietest places. These ceramics were not found in a gallery or an antique shop, but in the garage of a family home after the owner passed away. A small sticker on the base revealed that they were a wedding gift from 1934, carefully recorded in the bride's registry. Taking a closer look, the marks on the underside clearly identify them as works from Newcomb College pottery in New Orleans, an influential art pottery program connected to Newcomb College. Established in the late 19th century, the workshop became renowned for pottery designed and decorated by women artists. One of the pieces bears the cipher of decorator Anna Frances Simpson, which helps place its production in the 1920s. The covered jar is particularly striking. Many examples of this form survive without their lids, so the presence of the original cover dramatically increases its rarity and appeal. The decoration features delicate fuchsia blossoms that continue onto the lid, creating a unified design. Its coloration is also unusual. A vivid mint green paired with a rich, deep blue, far stronger than the softer tones typically associated with Newcomb pottery. The accompanying trivet is equally distinctive. It is larger than most examples and framed by a thick, rounded rim that strongly defines the circular form. The design of oak and moss is a classic Newcomb motif, and here it is rendered in an unusually deep blue glaze.
If they knew it needed a lid and didn't have the lid, it would be $1,200 to $1,600. Because it's got the lid and it's intact, minor damage, somewhere at auction between $3,000 and $4,000. So I'd say the two pieces together, somewhere between $5,500 to $7,500 at auction.
Wonderful.
They're really sweet ones, thank you.
Well, it's special because it was my mother's.
Can't put a price tag on that one.
Nope, nope.
I bought it at an estate sale in Grand Rapids, Michigan, about 4 years ago. I know it's Newcomb College from the distinctive mark, but that's about it.
Do you remember what you paid for it?
$18.
Sometimes the most ordinary purchase hides an extraordinary story. This piece, identified by its mark as a work from Newcomb College pottery, immediately stands out because of its unusual decoration. Most Newcomb works feature stylized flowers or botanical designs, yet this example shows a rare band of carved alligators encircling the surface, a motif seldom encountered in the tradition. The decoration was created by Marie de Hoa Leblanc, one of the most respected artists associated with the Newcomb workshop. She joined the program in the 1890s as a young student and later produced many of its most admired designs. Her signature appears on the surface, confirming the artist's hand. Unlike the earliest Newcomb ceramics that were flat, painted in a style influenced by English pottery, this piece shows a carved surface that adds texture and dimension to the design. The factory date code indicates it was made in 1906, an early and highly desirable period of production.
Okay.
So that's quite early. This particular piece at auction today would be $5,000 to $7,000.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
I was a student and working in New Hampshire. I was working at a summer stock theater. I wanted to bring a souvenir home to my mother, and I liked these mugs, and I asked how much they were, and they were $10 a piece. And being a starving college student, I said, oh no, I can't buy them. And he knew I was wanting them for my mother, and he says, well, for a mom, I'll give them to you for $5. So this was in 1964. Every time I'd visit her, we always had coffee with these mugs. They were special.
A set of simple pottery mugs purchased in 1964 as a small souvenir for a mother turns out to be a remarkable example of early American art pottery. The forms and decoration clearly point to the work of the Newcomb Pottery Studio at Newcomb College in New Orleans, a pioneering ceramics program founded around 1895 as part of the arts and crafts movement. The workshop was known for training women artists who created hand-thrown pottery, each piece individually decorated and marked with the college seal and the decorator's cipher. These mugs belong to the early years of Newcomb production. Unlike the matte finishes that later became typical of the studio, these pieces display glossy glaze with overglaze decoration, a feature seen in some of the earliest works. Subtle differences in size and shape reveal their handmade origin, since each mug was thrown individually on the potter's wheel. The marks on the base confirm their authenticity. The NNC mark identifies Newcomb College, while the date code and artist cipher reveal that at least one mug was decorated by Beverly Robertson around 1901. The designs vary from stylized motifs to a distinctive eggplant pattern, reflecting the arts and crafts movement's fascination with natural plant forms.
Now, the question is, you going to still
That
drink
was
your
good
coffee?
I had.
Absolutely. Now, truthfully, the market for a lot of pottery is off with the economy. So maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago, they might have been worth more like $3,000 a piece.
Wow.
So I think you made a pretty good investment.
Absolutely. I think so. $5 to $2,000 a piece. Wow.
I wouldn't drink coffee in them anymore.
No, I haven't for years.
These belong to my grandmother. They're actually a set of 6. My sister has the other 3. And I've recently rediscovered them in a closet in my home during a remodel. And I've had them since my grandmother passed away in 1999. These always sat in a special cabinet. We were not allowed to touch them. We never got to eat out of them.
Okay.
So.
But she did eat out of them.
Oh yes, these were her special dinner dessert.
These elegant footed dessert dishes belong to a decorative porcelain tradition associated with the Dresden workshop Ambrosius Lum, founded in 1,887 inches, the city of Dresden. The mark on the base shows a lamb together with the words Dresden, Germany, identifying the decorating studio. In the Dresden tradition, porcelain bodies were often produced by one factory and later sent to specialized decorating studios, where artists applied elaborate hand painting and gilding. Each sherbet cup stands on a delicate pedestal base and appears in a different color, a characteristic feature of these sets. The surfaces are entirely hand-painted with charming pastoral scenes inspired by the works of the 18th century French Rococo painter Antoine Watteau. These so-called Watteau scenes typically depict elegant couples in garden settings, conversing or playing music. Surrounding the images is lavish raised gilding, creating both texture and brilliance that emphasize the luxury nature of the porcelain. Originally, these dessert cups were produced in sets of 12 and were likely made around 1900, when Dresden porcelain decoration was highly fashionable. Although antique sets are usually most valuable when complete, these pieces are somewhat unusual because collectors often seek individual examples in different colors to complete their collections.
China, collectors there love this Dresden porcelain, and they particularly love lamb porcelain, and they have driven the prices of these up. So in today's market, when they're sold at a retail price, they usually sell for between $1,500 and $2,000 each.
Each?
Each.
That certainly is a big surprise. I can assure you my grandmother didn't pay that.
So the combined value for your 3 would be between $4,500 and $6,000 retail price.
I'm shocked. I'm truly shocked.
I think it's a little shocking myself.
I don't know a lot about it. It was in my family growing up for as long as I can remember. My parents would always be yelling, "Don't run in the house, you'll break the pink bowl. Don't throw the ball, you'll break the pink bowl." So it was my parents' most treasured possession, but I don't know a lot of the history of it.
First of all, let's just look at the piece in general. Now you have a long oval bowl here and a pitcher. Now what do you think that they're for?
I would think mostly like a wash basin type of thing.
You're right, it's a ewer and basin. It's decorated with this beautiful, luscious, rich pink color, which is just marvelous.
This object is a porcelain ewer and basin set, most likely produced in France during the late 18th or early 19th century. Such sets were traditionally used for washing before the widespread availability of indoor plumbing, consisting of a pitcher for pouring water and a large oval basin to collect it. The porcelain body suggests a connection to the famous Sèvres porcelain tradition, although the decoration was probably added later by an independent decorating workshop. During the French Revolution, production at several French porcelain factories, including Sèvres, was interrupted. Large quantities of undecorated white porcelain remained in storage and were later sold to outside decorators, who applied elaborate painted and gilded designs. This set is distinguished by its rich pink ground color, which contrasts beautifully with white cartouches containing delicate scenes of birds perched on branches. Surrounding the rim and surfaces are finely painted butterflies, moths, beetles, and other insects, adding a lively, naturalistic character. The heavy gilded decoration is particularly notable, indicating high-quality craftsmanship and careful hand finishing. A large gold anchor mark appears on the pieces, though it likely identifies the decorator responsible for the gilding rather than the porcelain manufacturer. Small pits and bubbles visible in the porcelain body are typical of earlier porcelain production and help confirm the age of the pieces.
You would buy them and decorate them. Now, the quality is really spectacular. The value is not on who did it, because we're not certain who that is, but the value is on the age, the immense appeal, and the decorative quality. And our best guess is that this set would sell for at least between $4,000 and $6,000.
Thank you so much.
Well, I know they've been in my husband's family for many, many years. They think they may have come out of Arizona or New Mexico, but that's just about all I really know about them. I was hoping you would tell me about them.
These ceramic vessels are characteristic examples of pottery made by the ancestral Pueblo peoples, often referred to as the Ancestral Puebloans, historically known as the Anasazi. This culture flourished roughly between 1000 and 1300 AD in the Four Corners region of the American Southwest, where the modern states of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado meet. These communities are widely recognized for their remarkable architecture, including pit houses, ceremonial kivas, and dramatic cliff dwellings built high into canyon walls. The pottery itself reflects the practical artistry of this culture. Local clay was shaped by hand using the coil building technique, in which long rolls of clay were layered to form the vessel before being carefully smoothed and scraped while still leather hard. This process allowed the potters to create surprisingly thin, yet durable walls. The smaller vessel here is most likely a seed jar, traditionally used to store seeds intended for planting, while the larger piece is a general-purpose bowl used in everyday domestic life. One particularly notable aspect of these examples is their condition. Much archaeological pottery from this culture survives only in fragments that must be reconstructed. The fact that both vessels remain intact significantly enhances their appeal and value to collectors.
This bowl, it's much more common, but again unusual because it's intact, about $800 to $1,000.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and the seed jar, probably $3,000 to $4,000.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And that's $3,000 to $4,000 retail price.
Oh, my. So what kind of an insurance value would you put on it?
I would probably put insurance value of about $6,000 on the two.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That sounds great.
I inherited it from my parents. I just sit it on a tabletop and look at it and feel it once in a while because I love the inside of it. Have ever since I was a child.
At first glance, it may look like an ordinary ceramic vessel, yet the moment you peer inside, the dramatic glaze seems to flow and pool like molten color. That striking effect is the signature style of Glen Lukens, one of the most influential innovators in American studio ceramics during the mid-20th century. Lukens taught for many years at the University of Southern California, where he helped lead a new movement of artists who were challenging traditional ceramic techniques in the late 1930s and 1940s. Rather than covering the entire surface with glaze, Lukens intentionally left large areas of raw clay exposed, allowing the natural body of the material to contrast with the vibrant colors of the glaze. He often formed his vessels in molds using thick clay bodies, then applied glaze almost like a painter applying color to canvas. In this piece, The richly colored glaze gathers inside the vessel in thick, flowing layers, creating a texture that appears almost molten and highly sculptural. The work is signed on the base in Lukens' typical manner, and likely dates from the late 1930s or early 1940s, a period when this heavy clay style was most popular in his studio. Today, collectors strongly appreciate these experimental surfaces and exposed clay bodies as they represent a turning point in modern American ceramics.
I have no idea. It just occurred to me last night to bring it to the Roadshow.
Well, I can tell you that in today's market, I would appraise this for $5,000 at auction.
Really? Oh my gosh, that's exciting and completely unexpected. Completely.
My wonderful Grammy gave it to me. My Grammy loved antiques, and she would go antiquing all the time. When she would bring home her antiques, she would disperse them around her house in areas where my grandpa wouldn't see it. She would bring it out about after 3 months, and he would notice it and say, "Well, is that new?" And she, no, dear. That just came from the other room. I'm just rearranging antique."
At first glance, it seems like a decorative lamp, yet the closer you look, the more extraordinary details emerge. Twisting bronze seaweed wraps around a porcelain body, while delicate seahorses cling to the stems and starfish and coral forms gather at the base, creating a lively marine scene that immediately captures the eye. The bronze mount carries the signature of Louis Chalon, a French artist born in 1866 who worked across many disciplines, including painting, illustration, metalwork, and sculpture. Although he is best known for works cast entirely in bronze, he occasionally experimented with mixed materials, combining bronze with ceramic elements to create decorative objects like this one. The porcelain body features a deep, luminous glaze inspired by ancient Chinese ceramics, a style that European artists admired and often attempted to emulate during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Based on the style and the artist's career, this piece was likely created around 1910 to 1915. The porcelain may even have been produced by the prestigious Sèvres manufactory, though further examination would be required to confirm that attribution.
Was this originally a vase?
Yes.
That was converted to a lamp, or was it always a lamp? We looked at it very closely, and we think it was always a lamp.
Oh.
It's really hard to say because there's so few examples of his work like this, but our guess it would probably sell for a retail price somewhere in the $3,000 to $5,000 range.
Oh my goodness, that's absolutely fantastic. It's an absolute gem in my house, so I thank you for giving me all this information.
A friend of mine was settling his parents' estate, and he knew I liked antiques, and so he invited me to come in and pick what I wanted. I just loved it on sight, but I got some other things too, but I really like this teapot. I like spongeware, and I have some pieces of blue. I've never seen yellow. I've seen green and red.
This vessel is actually a coffee pot produced in the English ceramic centre of Staffordshire around 1860. During the 19th century, many Staffordshire potteries specialized in affordable wares made largely for export, especially to the American market. To decorate these pieces quickly and economically, potters developed techniques such as spongeware and spatterware, both designed to create lively color effects with minimal labor. The decoration here is not true spongeware, but a related method known as spatterware, in which colored slip or glaze is flicked onto the surface to produce scattered patterns. This particular example belongs to the rare rainbow spatterware variety, distinguished by the use of several bright colors applied over a light ground. Among collectors, rainbow spatterware is considered one of the most desirable variations because relatively few examples survive today. Originally inexpensive household pottery, such pieces were widely used and rarely preserved carefully, which explains their scarcity in good condition. This coffee pot remains quite well preserved, showing only slight staining and a small chip on the spout.
Well, I think your $10 investment has gone a long way. We all believe that if it came to auction, the low estimate would be about $3,000. And the high estimate could be as much as $5,000.
Such a nice little thing. It's so pretty, I love it, but that's nice to know too. I didn't think that.
My dad was a collector. This is one of the pieces that he purchased. And about 30 years ago, he began to pass them on to me and my wife. We have great pride in what he has passed on to us and our family. The only thing I know about it is that it does have the Capodimonte mark on the back, at least I think it is anyway.
A remarkable porcelain coffret from a long-cherished family collection immediately draws attention with the crowned N mark on its base, a symbol often associated with the celebrated Capodimonte tradition of Naples. Although this mark originally referred to the royal porcelain factory founded in the mid-18th century, it later became widely used by other manufacturers seeking to evoke the prestige of Italian porcelain. Closer examination suggests that this piece was not made at the original Capodimonte factory, but rather dates to the mid-19th century. The quality of the glaze, the refined color scheme, and the confident hand-painted decoration all indicate a high-grade decorative porcelain. The corners are beautifully molded with raised figurative panels, a feature strongly connected to the sculptural style long associated with Capodimonte works. Crowning the lid is a finely modeled figure inspired by classical mythology, possibly representing Poseidon or a symbolic embodiment of water. The facial features carry a distinctly Italian character, soft yet expressive, enhancing the dramatic presence of the piece. Stylistic evidence points toward the Ginori factory at Docchia, near Florence, a manufacturer known for continuing the traditions of Italian porcelain during the 19th century. The impressive modeling, rich decoration, and original ebonized wooden stand suggest that this large decorative coffret was created as a luxury display object, likely once owned by a wealthy household and admired as much for its artistry as for its craftsmanship.
When it was originally brought to this country, would have belonged to a very wealthy family. And it's the kind of thing that if 2 or 3 people really want to own, it could, as we say, ring a bell at auction. We would place an estimate on it between $3,000 and $5,000. Is it possible it could double or even triple that? Yes, it is, because of its uniqueness.
I inherited from my mother. She and some of her friends were quite into collectibles, and I'm assuming that she purchased it somewhere in the Washington area.
This striking ceramic vessel is a rare example from the cameo jewel line produced by the American pottery company Weller Pottery. Founded in the late 19th century in Zanesville, Weller became one of the most influential American art pottery manufacturers, known for its richly decorated and often handcrafted ceramic pieces. Although the general market for Weller pottery has softened in recent years, certain decorative lines remain highly desirable to collectors, and cameo jewel is among the most distinctive. The name cameo jewel comes from the decorative band of faux jewels that encircle the base of the vessel. These are not real stones, but carefully hand-painted ceramic elements designed to imitate gemstones, giving the piece a luxurious and theatrical appearance. The body of the tankard is equally elaborate. A finely modeled figure of a woman harvesting grapes appears on the front, while the reverse shows a carved vineyard scene. The grape motif continues throughout the design, with vines, leaves, and clusters incorporated into the decorative borders. Formally, the object is a tankard, recognizable by its handle and pouring spout, suggesting it may have originally been intended for serving beverages. What makes this example particularly compelling is its rarity. Even experienced collectors encounter unfamiliar variations among Weller's thousands of designs.
So I suppose you could keep your fermented spirits in there if you wanted to.
I guess.
I discussed it with some of my colleagues. We think that a retail figure would be around $4,500.
Wow, really?
Now that's retail.
Whoa.
I love the colors. I love the design. It's a stunner.
It is. It is. I love it.
My mother married into a family in Atlanta that was very familiar with antiques, and my grandmother gave these to my mother when she married, welcoming her into our family.
And do you know where she got them? Did she get them here?
From an antique dealer here in Atlanta.
Okay. And that would have been when?
I think it was 1940.
Examining the base of these porcelain pieces reveals a blue JP mark, identifying them as the work of Jacob Petit, a Parisian porcelain maker active from the 1830s until the later 19th century. Petit operated a factory just outside Paris and became known for producing highly decorative porcelain that was widely exported, particularly to England and the United States. His work often reflected the ornate tastes of the mid-19th century and was especially popular among collectors of decorative European porcelain. These pieces were likely produced around 1850, during the height of Petit's output. They display the exuberant style for which he was famous: elaborate modeling, sculptural ornament, and richly applied gilding. The figures are carefully modeled, and the surfaces are decorated with hand-painted floral motifs and delicate gold accents. This combination of sculptural design and vivid decoration reflects the luxurious aesthetic typical of Petit's workshop. Interestingly, the design also carries a character that would have appealed to 19th-century American collectors, particularly in the southern United States, where ornate European imports were highly valued. The pieces are in notably good condition, which is uncommon for porcelain of this type since many examples have suffered chips, breaks, or heavy restoration over time.
There's a little bit of work on these, but it's minimal. I suspect if they were in an antique shop today, I think they'd be priced at least $3,500.
Ooh. Ooh.
And it's possible they'd be priced at $4,000 or $4,500.
Wow. Well, now I'm going to give them to my daughter.
Okay.
This was my grandmother's. It always hung in her living room. It was her very favorite piece. I don't know a whole lot about it, but she always called it her lovely lady. I knew it was old, and also my grandmother always said of all of her pieces, that was the one that was worth keeping. My dad always wanted to toss it out. He thought it looked old-fashioned and not very interesting. And just because it was old and I know absolutely nothing about it, I thought, okay, well, let's bring it in and see if we can find anything out.
This object is a hand-painted porcelain plaque produced by the KPM factory in Berlin, Germany, dating to the late 19th century. KPM, or Königliche Porzellanmanufaktur, was founded in 1763 and became one of the most prestigious porcelain manufacturers in Europe, especially renowned for finely painted portrait plaques inspired by classical and historical subjects. The plaque bears the signature Franz Till, an artist associated with porcelain decoration in Dresden, indicating that the image was painted by a professional porcelain painter working during that period. The style and technique are characteristic of KPM plaques, which were carefully hand-painted on porcelain panels and then mounted in decorative frames for display. The composition appears to be based on a well-known portrait of Empress Josephine, the wife of Napoleon Bonaparte, shown descending a staircase in an elegant pose. However, the facial features differ from the historical portrait. This suggests that the plaque may have been custom commissioned, using a popular composition but altering the face to resemble the person who ordered it or a family member.
I don't have a clue of what it might be worth. A couple $100, I really don't know.
Well, if you sold it at auction today, I think a conservative estimate would be between $3,000 and $4,000.
Really? Wow. That's great.
Because it's a nice, large size. Size always matters when it comes to KPM tiles.
Okay.
Very nicely done. Wouldn't surprise you if we got a little bit more than that, but it's a beautiful plaque, and thanks for bringing it in.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for the information. Dad would be shocked.
I'm glad he didn't throw it away.
No, me too.
This is a piece that was given to me from my father, who received it from my grandfather. And he received it from a lady that he repaired shoes for back in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
So how long ago did your grandfather get this gift from this lady?
He opened the shoe shop that he had in 1918, and so I'm guessing it has to be somewhere like near the 30s, maybe.
This object is a classic jardinière on pedestal, a decorative plant stand that became fashionable during the late 19th century. Such pieces were commonly placed in corners of parlors or bay windows and used to display ferns or tropical plants, reflecting the Victorian passion for indoor gardening. The example here was most likely produced in southern France around 1890. The piece is finished in the vibrant ceramic style known as majolica, which originated in United Kingdom in the mid-19th century and quickly spread across Europe. Majolica pottery is recognized for its glossy glaze and rich, saturated colors. The deep cobalt blue ground seen here is especially desirable to collectors because it creates dramatic contrast with the naturalistic floral decoration molded onto the surface. The sculptural foliage and flowing organic forms reflect the strong decorative traditions of French ceramic workshops of the period. While many Victorian jardinières survive today and often carry modest value, the quality of the modeling, the powerful cobalt color, and the excellent preservation of this example make it stand out.
If this had a different palette of colors, if it didn't have the cobalt blue as the main color, let's say it was white or yellow or something pale, it would be worth a lot less. The condition is terrific. Your grandfather clearly looked after it. I think if it was in the right place in the right antique shop, it could certainly carry a retail price of $3,500.
Oh, wow.
I bought it at an auction in Salt Lake City about 15 to 20 years ago.
What'd you pay for it?
$20. I did a little research on the mark on the bottom, and from the best I could tell, it was manufactured in London, England in approximately 1878 to 1879 by Martin Brothers.
Anything about two faces on it? You know anything about that?
I believe, I don't know for a fact, that it's Napoleon and the Duke of Wellington.
Any reason why they'd be on there together?
They're adversaries.
A curious stoneware vessel purchased for only $20 at auction reveals a far more remarkable story. The mark on the base links the piece to Martin Brothers of Southall, London, one of the most innovative ceramic studios of Victorian England. The workshop was led artistically by Robert Wallace Martin and operated in the late 19th century, helping transform traditional stoneware into imaginative sculptural objects. The salt-glazed stoneware body and the mark Martin Southall indicate an early production period, roughly between 1877 and 1879. The form itself is highly unusual. Two opposing faces appear on the vessel and are often interpreted as the historic rivals Napoleon Bonaparte and Arthur Wellesley, first Duke of Wellington, a playful pairing that reflects the satirical character often found in Martin Brothers' creations. Martin Brothers became famous for their eccentric sculptural ceramics, particularly their grotesque jugs and bird-formed tobacco jars known to collectors as wally birds. The faint scent of tobacco inside suggests this piece also functioned as a humidor, originally fitted with a removable lid that is now missing, possibly designed as two military hats referencing the figures below.
What's more interesting about it is because there's so many Martin Brothers collectors out there and they're so hot, it wouldn't surprise me if it doubled or tripled that estimate.
Really?
Quite a nice piece. Now, if it had its top We would anticipate an appropriate auction estimate, probably $6,000 to $9,000.
Oh, my
And it
Lord.
would not surprise me if it did, maybe $15,000 or more. That would
That's
be nice.
amazing. Yes, it would be very nice.
I got them from an antique dealer 50 years ago, or my mother did. I'd gone to this dealer to buy cups and saucers for my mother at her birthday or Christmas or something. And she had this set, and she wouldn't sell it. And finally, she called my mother in '51 and said she was ready to part with it. And then my mother gave it to us for Christmas the following year. My mother paid $100 for it.
And where was this antiques dealer?
In Saginaw, Michigan.
In Saginaw, Michigan.
And her husband was a judge, so she got first crack at all the estates up there.
All the good stuff. I'm going to turn the coffee pot over so we can have a look at what's on the bottom.
This object is a miniature English porcelain tea and coffee service produced by the Cawley Porcelain Factory in Shropshire, England. The mark on the base identifies it as Salopian ware, a name derived from Salop, the historical name of the county of Shropshire, where the factory operated during the late 1700s. The Cawley factory was active from around 1775 to the early 1800s and is known for delicate porcelain, influenced by Chinese ceramics. The decoration on this set reflects that influence, with hand-painted designs in a Chinese style, a fashionable taste in England during the 18th century. This group is particularly interesting because it is a child's tea service. In the 18th and 19th centuries, miniature porcelain sets like this were used not only as toys but also as teaching tools. They helped children, especially young girls, learn proper table manners and how to handle fine porcelain while serving tea. The set includes several trios, a typical arrangement from the late 1700s, consisting of a saucer shared by a tea bowl and a small coffee cup. The most charming element is the miniature coffee pot, a beautifully proportioned piece that collectors especially admire.
We had an appraisal of all our antiques. At that time, he appraised it at $700.
I think in the 1970s, that's a fair price. Cawley is a tiny, rather insignificant factory that's heavily romanticized. So it has a good following in collectors. For insurance valuation, this little group would be valued up to $3,000.
Wow, thank you.
A large part of the value of that is actually in the coffee pot. The coffee pot is one of the sweetest little pieces of Cawley porcelain any collector could ever wish to have.
Grandma purchased it in late 1950s, maybe 1960, from an antique auction in Pasadena, California. She had said there were 2 sets made in the 1930s for the Chicago's World Fair, and that one set belonged to Al Jolson, and she bought the other set. We have 169 pieces of this.
Whoa.
We found absolutely no damage at all on any single thing. We don't believe they've ever been eaten on. Grandma had them displayed, always till the day she died.
Examining this large dinner service, the marks on the reverse identify it as porcelain produced by Hutchenrother in Bavaria during the 1930s. The green factory mark corresponds with the company's interwar production, confirming that the porcelain itself was manufactured in Germany before being exported. Like many European porcelain blanks of the period, these pieces were shipped to the United States undecorated, where independent decorating studios would add elaborate patterns and refire them in a kiln before selling them on the American market. The service is particularly lavish, finished with heavy gilding described as 24-karat encrusted gold and platinum. Such decoration reflects the taste for luxury tableware in the early 20th century. With 169 pieces in the set and virtually no signs of use, it appears the service was primarily displayed rather than used for dining. The idea that it might have been sold during the 1933 to 1934 Century of Progress International Exposition is plausible, as manufacturers and decorating firms often marketed large quantities of decorative china at world's fairs. Family lore suggests that a similar service may have belonged to entertainer Al Jolson, though such connections are difficult to verify. What is clearer is that when new, a set like this represented an extraordinary luxury purchase. In the 1950s, spending $10,000 on porcelain would have equaled the cost of a suburban house.
So sets of china on the secondhand market, and even new sets of china, have plummeted in popularity and in value. So sets that cost a lot of money, whether it's 20 years ago or 100 years ago, are bringing pennies on the dollar. If you paid an appraiser to appraise this for replacement value, I suspect that they would have probably appraised the whole set for only somewhere maybe between $2,000 and $4,000. That seems ridiculously low to me, but it's the marketplace that makes the rules. If you sold it at an estate seller auction, it would probably sell for far less than that.
Yeah.
This gargoyle has been in my family for really about as long as I can remember. My parents always had it hanging in the corner in the living room, and as a kid I used to think it was really frightening, and I used to decorate it with balloons and things. The family history is that it came from my great uncle in Pennsylvania. He was an attorney, and apparently he got this in lieu of payment from a client, and that's really all I know about it.
Perched with a fierce expression and dramatic curves, this ceramic gargoyle carries the unmistakable spirit of historic European architecture. Its exaggerated features and bold decorative colors suggest that it was inspired by the fantastical stone creatures that once guarded the walls of medieval cathedrals. The modeling, glaze, and use of gilded highlights strongly point to an Italian origin, likely produced in the late 19th century. Many ceramic workshops in southern Italy, particularly around Naples, specialized in decorative pottery influenced by historic artistic traditions. The loose, expressive sculpting of the clay and the rich color palette seen here are hallmarks of that regional production. Stylistically, the piece belongs to the Renaissance Revival movement, which became extremely fashionable across Europe during the second half of the 19th century. Designers looked back to Renaissance art and architecture, reviving motifs such as grotesques, monsters, and gargoyles for use in furniture, ceramics, and interior decoration. This example was clearly designed to be mounted high on a wall so the creature would appear to gaze down at viewers, heightening its theatrical effect. It may even echo gargoyles found on Italian cathedral facades.
Never seen anything like it, but my guess is a retail price would probably be at least $2,000 or $3,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
It looks like something that should be in a Gothic castle, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes, next time I buy a castle.
Yeah, you can build a whole house around it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I got it from my grandmother, and she got it from a moving and storage company in St. Louis. 1939 is when she got it, and she paid $25. That was money she'd saved up. That was the Depression, so she didn't have much money, but she makes hats. And even in the Depression, everybody has to have a hat.
It was a lot of money back then.
Yeah, it was.
It's in remarkably good condition. How did it stay so clean all these years?
Well, I guess everybody just walked around it. But in my house, I have a fish line that I tied it to the wall.
This object is a ceramic umbrella stand produced by the American pottery company Roseville Pottery in the mid-1910s. The form was designed to stand near an entrance where umbrellas could be stored upright, yet pieces like this often suffered damage over time from metal umbrella tips, striking the interior, or from everyday household wear. The remarkable condition of this example, therefore, immediately stands out. The stand belongs to Roseville's well-known Persian line, introduced shortly before 1916. This series is sometimes described as a creamware line because of its pale background glaze, which provides a soft base for the vivid hand-painted decoration. The bright colors and stylized motifs were thought to evoke the richness associated with Persian decorative arts, which likely inspired the name. Technically, the piece represents an interesting transitional stage in Roseville's production. Earlier wares were entirely hand-decorated, while later factory production relied more heavily on mechanical processes. In this case, decoration was painted by hand within molded outlines on the surface, combining artisanal detail with early industrial efficiency. Many pieces from this period were left unmarked, which explains the absence of a factory stamp.
Usually you see one of these, and I have seen this form with this idea before, and there's some damage, and they bring $400, $500, $600. This is the cleanest example. There can't be a cleaner one out there. This is as good as it gets. And I think at auction, I'd estimate it for somewhere between $1,700 and $2,300.
Oh my goodness. I just can't imagine that.
Hey, 20.
You hear a noise? It's my mother turning over her grave.
So my grandmother, who came here from Portugal, gave it to my mother, and my mother gave it to me before she passed about 10 years or so ago.
Right.
So it's been in the family for at least 60, 70 years.
Now there's a name on there, Fall River. Is that where your family was from?
Fall River, yeah. We settled into Fall River back in the 1910 era.
Well, there's a lot of history between Massachusetts and tea.
Oh, yeah, there is.
And it kind of goes back to England, where this teapot comes from.
Oh, okay.
This teapot is an example of traditional English bargeware, a distinctive type of decorative pottery associated with the canal culture of 19th century Britain. Bargeware pieces were commonly produced in the Midlands, particularly around the town of Measham, which is why they are sometimes called Measham ware. They were especially popular among the families who lived and worked on canal barges and narrowboats, and many pieces were personalized with names, dates, or locations. A defining feature of bargeware is the deep brown Rockingham-style glaze that covers the surface, giving the pottery its rich chocolate-colored appearance. This glossy glaze is typically contrasted with brightly colored applied decorations, often in the form of molded flowers, leaves, or inscriptions. These elements were added by hand, making each piece slightly unique and giving the pottery a strong folk art character. What makes this particular teapot especially interesting is the inscription referencing Fall River in North America. Most surviving bargeware pieces carry British place names, so a North American reference is highly unusual. It suggests that the piece may have been made as a special commission or intended for someone connected with the United States.
So again, we thought about it, and I'm going to give you a value that I think is fair for replacement or insurance.
Okay.
As $2,000.
Wow.
Great thing.
Wow. Well, that's great news. Thank you very much for that insight on it.
I picked them up at a rummage sale. I was just drawn to the color and the profiles on them. I thought they were really interesting. I thought that they might be like Grecian or Roman, but I really wasn't sure. I knew that they were some kind of pottery piece. When I flipped them over, I saw an artist named Raymond Porter.
Okay.
And I did a little bit of research on the web and
Okay.
found out that he taught at the Massachusetts School of Art. He was also a sculptor. He had some reliefs that were in some government buildings and some statues of military figures, and that's about the end of where I got with it.
These objects are a pair of Art Deco ceramic plaques created by the American sculptor Raymond Porter, produced at the Van Briggle Pottery Company in Colorado Springs, and dated 1938. Van Briggle Pottery, founded in 1901, became one of the most respected American art pottery studios, particularly associated with the arts and crafts movement and later stylistic developments in early 20th century decorative art. The plaques bear inscriptions on the reverse identifying Raymond Porter, who was a sculptor and instructor at the Massachusetts School of Art in Boston. Porter was known for sculptural works and reliefs installed in public buildings, as well as figures reflecting American historical and cultural themes. His signature and the initials RP, along with the mark SC for sculptor, confirm his authorship. These plaques depict Native American profiles, rendered in a striking Art Deco style. Instead of naturalistic modeling, the figures are simplified into bold, angular forms that emphasize strong silhouettes and geometric structure. This approach reflects the transition in Porter's work from earlier arts and crafts influences toward the modern, stylized aesthetics popular during the 1930s. The rich glaze and distinctive coloration are characteristic of Van Briggle's ceramics, which are well known for their matte finishes and carefully controlled color tones.
These are pure Art Deco, and they are still American Indians, but they have been turned into these very angular, bold, sculptural figures. How much did you pay for these?
I paid 50 cents each for them, so a
50
whopping $1 for the pair.
I'm happy to tell you that in today's market, at auction, they would probably bring $800 or $1,000 a piece.
Yay, a piece?
A piece.
Get out.
No.
Yay, what great news. Thank you so much. Well, this belonged to my mother's oldest brother, John. He was born in the late 1800s. He was in World War I, but we don't know exactly where he got it. We think he learned about beautiful art when he was in Europe, and then he wanted to build a beautiful house when he came back, and he was going to have a niche, and this owl would be the feature. But then he had some financial setbacks, and he never built the house. And he eventually gave this to his youngest sister, my mother. It's been in the family ever since.
This striking ceramic owl seems simply decorative, yet a closer look reveals a fascinating story rooted in European art pottery. The sculpture was produced by the Bohemian Ceramic Company, commonly known as Amphora, founded in 1892 in the Teplitz region by the partnership of Alfred Stellmacher, Rudolf Riesner, and Adolf Kessel. This region, located between Prague and Vienna, was one of the most important centers of ceramic production in Central Europe. Amphora is best known for its Art Nouveau works, often featuring elegant female figures or flowing decorative motifs. Because of this, a fully sculptural animal piece like this owl is quite unusual. Modeled in glazed porcelain, the bird closely resembles a great horned owl, an animal long associated with wisdom and knowledge. The base bears a stamped mark, including the word Czechoslovakia, indicating the piece was produced after 1918, when the new nation was formed following World War I. The molded number likely refers to the factory mold used for the form. Based on its style and mark, the sculpture was probably created in the late 1910s or early 1920s.
If you saw this in an antique store, a nice design store these days, if it were there at somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000, I would not be surprised.
Oh, wonderful. Well, my Uncle John was very smart, and I know owls are supposed to be wise, and so is my brother, so I'm just delighted. Thank you.
Well, it came to me by way of my mother, by way of a Miss Betty Hazen. Betty was my mother's instructor in nursing school in Chester Hospital, and they became fast friends. Betty joined the Army in the Second World War, joined the Army Nurse Corps, went to England, served at Eisenhower's headquarters, picked this thing up and its sister prior to returning home. Now, that's the story I got. And I was never smart enough to ask exactly what is this. And it's been the subject of all manner of guesses, and one of my better friends told me it was an egg warmer.
This object is an early 19th century bow pot, a decorative ceramic vessel used for displaying fresh branches or bulb flowers such as tulips and hyacinths. Examples like this were produced in England around 1810, most likely in the well-known pottery region of Staffordshire. Bow pots were typically designed with flat backs so they could sit neatly against a wall or on a mantelpiece, and they were often made in pairs to decorate both sides of a fireplace. The piece is made of pearl-glazed earthenware. Much of the decoration is created through transfer printing, a common technique in early 19th century ceramics that allowed detailed scenes to be applied efficiently. At the same time, certain elements were enhanced by hand painting, including the oak leaf and acorn border and the small mask motifs, giving the piece a richer, decorative quality. Bow pots from this period are not extremely common today, largely because their fragile structure made them vulnerable to damage. Finding an example that remains visually appealing and largely intact is therefore quite unusual.
Fabulous condition, the decorative nature, and the early period as a single item. I believe that in a good auction, it could bring at least $1,000 and maybe $1,500. If the other one proves to be a pair of originality, we would value the pair at more than twice that, perhaps between $2,500 and $3,500 for the pair.
Good.
It's been in my family a real long time. My dad was an appraiser. He did appraisal for the government, customs, and he said to me one day, whatever you do when you throw all the junk out, this isn't junk, don't get rid of it. So it's been sitting in our living room for a really long time. It just has a lot of sentimental value to me.
Sure.
This decorative object is a striking example of late Victorian ceramic design, produced in the 1880s by the English maker George W. Wister. The piece reflects the exuberant taste of the Victorian era, when elaborate naturalistic motifs were highly fashionable in domestic decoration. The composition is especially theatrical. A large shell form appears to be supported by sculpted coral, surrounded by additional shells and flowing seaweed forms. Perched prominently on the surface is a mottled lizard, a whimsical element that adds both movement and visual intrigue. The surface is richly enhanced with multiple tones of gilding. While the decoration contains real gold, it is combined with binding materials in the paint to create the shimmering effect typical of Victorian luxury ceramics. Made of porcelain, this model was produced in several variations, sometimes with the lizard and sometimes without it. The same design was also issued in majolica, demonstrating that the form was a popular decorative model of the period. When originally sold in the 19th century, pieces like this were considered luxury items, typically purchased in fashionable shops by middle and upper-class households.
Wow, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
So, I'm crazy about it. In terms of value, it does have good value these days, but not spectacular. A retail price today would be around $400 to $600.
Well, the value to me is my father asking me to keep it, and being here today with you guys is the best part of it all.
I bought it on an estate auction in Tripp, South Dakota.
And is this something you do a lot, go to estate auctions?
I do like to go to them.
Now, when you bought it, did they tell you anything about what it was, or what did you figure it out?
I had read an article on majolica about 2 weeks earlier that had color articles, and when I saw the glaze, I thought it was a piece of majolica.
But what do you think it is when, after getting beyond the majolica part?
I think it's a cheese keeper.
How much did you pay for it? Can I ask that?
$40.
And do you feel you got a good buy at this? And do you think?
I think so.
Okay.
This object appears at first glance to be a Victorian majolica cheese stand with cover, a form commonly produced in the late 19th century and associated with the colorful ceramic tradition known as Victorian majolica. Authentic examples were typically used on the dining table to store and present cheese, and they were often richly decorated with naturalistic motifs and vibrant glazes. However, closer examination of the form and glaze suggests that this piece is not a genuine 19th century example. The size is noticeably smaller than most authentic cheese stands from the Victorian period, which were designed to accommodate larger cheeses. In addition, the shape of the cover, and especially the finial knob, does not match the proportions normally seen on original Victorian majolica forms. The glaze also provides important clues. Victorian majolica tends to display rich but slightly muted tones created through traditional glazing techniques, whereas the colors on this piece appear overly bright and somewhat harsh. The pronounced glaze drips and the absence of any maker's mark further indicate that it is unlikely to be a period piece, since many higher quality examples were marked by their manufacturers. Taken together, These details suggest that the object is a relatively recent reproduction inspired by Victorian majolica, most likely produced in Southeast Asia for the decorative market.
And all in all, it adds up to a piece made in Southeast Asia and made probably quite recently. When you bought it, I suspect it was no more than a few years old. If you found an authentic Victorian majolica cheese stand and cover of this sort of quality, it would likely be worth at least $1,000 and maybe $1,500. I think it's worth what you paid for it. I think $40 is about right.
I'll have to keep looking.